everyone, welcome back. We are in week 3 of the story of Joseph. Have you ever been mad at God? I have to admit this week I was. I was very frustrated. A lot of things started going wrong. Just a lot of bad stuff happened. And more and more and more. And I just started getting more and more stressed about it. And some people had the power to make it better, and they didn't do that. And so I was angry. Well, I didn't say anything to them. I didn't say anything to hurt their feelings or anything. I just, got off the phone or stopped talking to them about it and went on. But inside, I was angry. And then that anger turned towards God for a little while. For a few hours, I was mad that God didn't fix my problem the way that I thought it should be fixed. Well, I finally came around. And after a couple hours, I prayed and I asked for forgiveness. And I started realizing that God was in control and He had a plan. I wasn't as good as Joseph was, because remember, it was like a roller coaster for him. And he stayed focused on God and did the right thing. I had to ask for forgiveness for those few hours where I was really angry. Remember, on that roller coaster, he gets a special coat from his dad, and he just feels honored. But then he comes down, his brothers throw him into a cistern and sell him as a slave. And then he's recognized for his hard work, so he's back up again. And then he's thrown into prison for something he didn't even do. He interprets the dreams of 2 prisoners, and he thinks one of them is going to help him get out of prison and tell Pharaoh. But then the cupbearer forgot about him for 2 more years in prison. Joseph was such a success. All of those things happened, and he didn't lose his faith. I did for a little while yesterday, and I'm really sorry that I did. And I apologize to God, and He'll forgive me. Well, the cupbearer forgot about him, but then he did remember when Pharaoh had those crazy dreams and brought him out. Joseph used that success and those blessings from God, though, and he led the country of Egypt to plan for survival. Remember, there were going to be 7 years of famine coming up. So he organized and got everything in order so that they would all survive and even have more to help others. But there's just one problem. In our first week about Joseph had some original dreams that didn't make any sense. Remember, those 11 bundles of grain bowed down to him, and the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were supposed to bow down to him? But that hasn't happened yet. Other people bow down to Joseph now. Remember, he is just under Pharaoh, is in control of the whole country. But he's far away from his family in Canaan, and they have no idea. Well, in Genesis 42, remember we started in Genesis 37. Genesis 42, we find out that Jacob and his 11 sons, remember, he's no longer thinking that Joseph is one of his sons, and their families were really struggling. They didn't have any food to eat. And so Jacob sent 10 of Joseph's brothers. He didn't send Benjamin, the youngest one, and told them to go buy grain in Egypt so they could live. And so they showed up right in front of Joseph, but it had been so many years, they didn't even recognize him. They didn't know that it was their brother. But he recognized them. But he really wondered where Benjamin was. It had been such a long time. And that's the last place they would have expected to find their brother, the slave, or so they thought. So he started asking them questions so he could find out if Jacob and Benjamin were also okay. He pretended, though, that they must be spies and locked them up. Time for revenge, right? I mean, his brothers were so horrible to him. Wouldn't that be the right thing to do to get back at them now? He had the power to hurt them or kill them for what they had done. This is perfect. Well, not exactly. Joseph listened and trusted in God. God is the one who handles it when somebody does something wrong, not us. He kept one of his brothers, Simeon, and he sent the others home and told them to get their youngest brother, Benjamin, and bring him back. This is crazy. Even more crazy, Joseph gave them each full bags of grain and hid the money that they had brought in the bags as well. So they didn't even have to pay for the food that he was giving them. He gave his mean brothers grain so that they could live. That doesn't seem fair at all, does it? Well, they got home, and Jacob was not happy about these orders. He was worried that Simeon was going to be killed, and Benjamin too, if they took him back to Egypt. And at first he refused to let them go back. But soon they were out of grain again, and they needed more. Judah promised to take the blame if anything happened to Benjamin, promised his daddy to take care of him. And they carried even more money back again, along with a gift to hopefully win over the ruler of Egypt and get what they needed. They still had no idea it was Joseph. Well, Joseph had his officials bring them all to his house when he saw Benjamin was with them. They were getting scared. They were worried they were in trouble because they didn't pay for the grain last time. They had found the bags of money when they were on their trip home. How were they going to prove that it wasn't their fault that the money was in their grain sacks when they got home? So they told the story to one of Joseph's workers, hoping to find out how much trouble they were in. The official told them not to be afraid, that he had been the one to put their money back in the sacks. Whew. It turned out that Joseph was throwing a party for them. The official brought Simeon out to see them too, joined his brothers again. Well, Joseph came in at noon to see them, but Hebrews were not allowed to eat with Egyptians, so he sent food in to them and he had to eat separately. But it was strange. They started noticing that the orders had been for them to sit exactly in the age of their order. And then he sent 5 times as much food to Benjamin's seat. They started noticing these things, and they didn't understand how this man would know their ages and know how to put them in that order. Well, he had their sacks filled with as much food as they could carry, along with their money again. But he was sneaky, and he hid a silver cup of his own in Benjamin's bag of food. They didn't know it was there. The brothers left the next morning, but they didn't get far. Soon, officials chased them down and dug through their bags and accused them from stealing from Joseph. Brothers couldn't believe it. They didn't think they had stolen anything. But the officials searched the bags and uncovered the silver cup in Benjamin's bag. Oh no, they knew they were in trouble. They came back to the city and they begged Joseph to be forgiven. Judah pleaded with Joseph to forgive them because their father was old and he had already lost one son. He told Joseph that Jacob would surely die if he lost Benjamin too. Joseph apparently couldn't keep up the acting job anymore. He sent everyone else out of the room so he could be alone with his brothers. In Genesis 45:4, Joseph tells his secret. Can you imagine how they felt? I can't. They probably were so excited to see him and then had just the feelings of guilt that all of those years come flooding back. Joseph was the most powerful person in Egypt, and he had to be mad at them for what they had done. But instead, Joseph told them not to be afraid. He tells them that it must have been part of God's plan so that he could save so many people during the famine. He tells them to hurry home and get their father and their families, and he promises to take care of them and tells them that there's still 5 more years of famine coming, that they really need to be there with him. Pharaoh even got into the act. He wanted to bless Joseph, and he offered Joseph's family some of the best land in Egypt, along with wagons and donkeys for them to carry their stuff back to Egypt. So they hurried home. Jacob was so excited. He packed up everything he had and offered sacrifices to God to thank him. When they approached the city, Judah went ahead of the caravan to tell Joseph they were almost there. Joseph hurried out in his chariot to meet them. He forgave his brothers, even though they did some horrible things. He forgave Potiphar's wife and the cupbearer, even though they had caused him problems too. Remember, let's count. He had lived in slavery or in prison for over 20 years. It wasn't just a little inconvenient. My problems this week were just a little inconvenient. He understood what most people don't. It's not our job to hurt people that hurt us. We call that revenge. And a lot of people want that. That's kind of our natural instinct sometimes when somebody hurts us. And it's very hard sometimes for all of us to show love and forgiveness, but we're supposed to do that to everyone. This book tells us that page after page. Joseph proves, though, that it can be done with God's help. One of my favorite Bible verses tells us how Joseph was able to forgive his brothers. And even God working out that I was studying these passages to come meet with you for this week, this verse helped me to get over my anger and move past it and realize that God was in control. I always know it, but I sometimes forget for a little while. So let me read you this verse. It's Genesis 50:20. As for you, Joseph is talking to his brothers, you meant evil against me. That's true, right? His brothers really meant to hurt him. They first were going to kill him, and then they sold him into slavery. They were not trying to help him. But here it continues. But God meant it for good. God knew all along, every step, what was going to happen. And he showed Joseph along the way and gave him strength to get through those times when he was a slave or in prison, just like he helps us. We're in a quarantine right now and nobody is happy about it, right? And a lot of people have said that they are angry at God for not stopping it because he does have the power. But we have to come back to this verse and lots of other verses and know that God is in control and he always will be. Never will he leave us. But it's also important to forgive others, just like Joseph did. We cannot accept and expect Jesus to forgive us when we sin and we make mistakes like I did yesterday, unless we're willing to forgive others. I hope that you'll remember that every day. And I hope that you remember Jesus loves you more than you can imagine. Hi everyone, welcome back to the lab. The magic show. I forgot where I was for a minute. This trick is just like a magic trick, but it's really based on science. So we've been talking about Joseph, and we have heard all the horrible things that have happened to him and for how long, and more just kept piling on him. But he stayed strong and he stayed faithful to God. So I wanted to show you a magic trick that kind of represents Joseph. So we're going to say that this candle is just like Joseph. And I'm going to put my glasses on, even though it's a magic show. Safety first. This is not a trick you can do by yourself. You have to have a grown-up with you that can do this, because lighters are not supposed to be used by kids. Okay, very, very dangerous. Okay, so I've got this candle, and we're going to say that this is Joseph. And we know that God put a light in Joseph. He was faithful to God. He knew about God. He believed in God. And Miss Jane needs some help here. Here we go. And when we have that faith and we have God's love inside of us, then we're a light to others. And that's what Joseph tried to be. But sometimes things just happen that are bad. Sometimes we make mistakes and we cause our own problems that we're in, but sometimes others do it too. In this case, Joseph's brothers were the ones that caused problems for him, right, to begin with. And so they didn't like it that he got that special coat, and so they decided to kill him, and then ended up just selling him into slavery. So some really bad things started happening to Joseph, right? That's enough to put anybody's light out. They could be that depressed. But God didn't let that happen. Did you see that? Were you paying attention? I didn't even touch the wick. I was way up here, and it relit. That's how powerful God's love is. He didn't let that happen to Joseph. Joseph kept his faith and kept his strength, and he worked really hard, even as a slave, and did such a good job. He was promoted, and Potiphar, the person who owned him, isn't that a terrible expression, noticed and put him in charge of more and more things. He just was very successful and helped Potiphar become successful. But then more stuff started happening that was bad. Potiphar's wife makes up this crazy story and gets Joseph in trouble for something he did not do and gets him thrown into prison. That's definitely enough to put somebody's light out. Oh my goodness. Did you see it? I was way up here with it and it relit again. That is amazing. I wonder what's going on. Must have just been a coincidence. Let's wait and see. So here Joseph is back at the bottom, right? He is in prison, but he didn't let that stop him from doing work that honored God. No matter what you do, God expects you to honor him. And that's exactly what Joseph did. He didn't let all the bad things happen. He didn't sit and whine and complain because he shouldn't have been in prison. He worked. And he did such a good job that the prison keeper noticed and put him in charge of other things. And he was in charge of the other prisoners even. Well, soon, 2 new prisoners come in. Pharaoh got mad at his cupbearer and his chief baker and throws them in prison. Well, time goes by and they have these crazy dreams, and Joseph knows that God's given him a gift with dreams, and so he asks about them. Well, he interprets their dream, but he asked for a favor in return. He asked the cupbearer to remember him when he went back to work for Pharaoh, so that Pharaoh would get him out of prison. Finally, so much time had already gone by, and he didn't even commit the crime to begin with. But Joseph doesn't have that kind of luck, does he? The cupbearer completely forgets about him. That's enough to put somebody's light out too. Ooh, it did it again. I hope you were watching. Well, the cupbearer finally remembers Joseph when Pharaoh has the crazy dreams about the fat cows and the skinny cows and all of that. And he had asked everybody in the land what they meant that he thought would know. Nobody did. And the cupbearer remembered, hey, there's this guy in prison I met. Remember that time when you threw me in prison? I met this guy Joseph, and he could interpret dreams. So Pharaoh gets him out. Then Joseph becomes one of the rulers in Egypt. He organizes the plan to save the Egyptian people and other people too. God turned what was bad into things that are good. And Joseph had to wait a really long time for that, though. Remember, he was about 17 when he got the coat, and he's about 30 when Pharaoh gets him out of prison. That's a really long time to be either a slave or a prisoner when you had done nothing wrong, right? Well, Joseph gets a chance to shine this light even more when his brothers come back. He had the chance to show revenge, but that's not where Joseph's heart was. And God asks us to be forgiving of others too, because he gives us forgiveness when we do something wrong. So Joseph shined that light, and he let his brothers not only live, but he took care of them. He brought them in and took care of them and their families that he had never even met, because they were younger when he was sold into slavery. And he helped save all of Egypt, that God used him to do that. So I hope that you will remember that God has a special purpose for you too. And even when things go wrong, it doesn't mean that God left you. It means that he loves you and that he has a purpose for you, and he has a purpose for whatever's going wrong. Sometimes that's really hard to remember, though. Let's do the trick one more time. So here's what happens. When I blow out the flame, hopefully you can see the smoke billowing up. If I light this at just the right time in the path of the smoke, it will shoot the flame right back down to the candle, so I don't have to touch the wick. Watch and see. I've got to find the pillar of smoke, and sometimes that's hard to see for just a couple seconds. And then as soon as I do, if I light this, so sometimes these are a little tricky, and so I've missed it a little bit here and there. Let's do it again. So I can be a little higher too. Let's try one more higher. My house is getting very smoky. I mean, my lab. I hope that you have an awesome week. I hope that you'll remember not to show revenge when somebody does something to hurt you, but to show God's love and show forgiveness, just like Jesus forgives us. And I also hope you remember that I love you and Jesus loves you more than you can imagine. Have a great week.